Presentation of the budget for fiscal year 2026. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
And for our test.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We begin our meeting tonight with public audience. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? Joe?
No. I'll get it started.
Thank you.
When my children were enrolled in the Simsbury
Joe,
schools
I'm
with
sorry.
high enrollment.
Joan,
it was
excuse
not-
me, name and address just for the clerk and then go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, no worries.
much better. I will start again. Listen carefully. When my children were enrolled in
Joan, what address do you live at?
I live at 26 Whitcomb Drive.
Thank you, Ms. Coe. I
Code
appreciate that.
COE.
Thank you.
When my children enrolled in the Simsbury schools with a high enrollment, there was not a department of special education. Over the years, many special interest groups focused on a cause and developed an industry around special education with teachers, social workers, therapists, and many other support groups to access funding for this new industry. The state was lobbied by special interest groups to mandate the public schools develop programs with students that were tagged as special education students to meet the needs of the students with unregulated expenditures. Governor Lamont just vetoed a bill for $40 million for special education. Unless a new model is developed, the taxpayers will be burdened with the escalating costs. Throwing money at a failed system is not a taxpayer's responsibility to keep funding special education without any changes in the delivery of services to reduce costs. The taxpayers have the power of the purse, and they should use it. It is time the taxpayers to veto the budgets as approved and vote no on all expenditures until a new resolution is developed. ARPA funding was used by the Board of Education for 2 social workers as a pilot program at a cost of $450,000. $250,000 was added to the pilot program for youth services. These expenditures should have been eliminated in the operating budget, but they remain. According to the state education website, Simsbury spent $10,642,207 in the 2005-06 budget for special education. The budget for 2022-23 for special education was $21,054,775. The Simsbury schools have had fewer students over the years, but the budget for special education has doubled. It appears like everything in government, find a cause for concern and build an industry around the issue. The special education industry has encapsulated special education funding by using taxpayer money to enrich themselves with adding expenditures year after year. The schools should not be spending thousands of dollars on behavioral issues for the students. The schools should return to educating students with the core programs that have endured over the years with funding needed to continue these services. Eliminating funding for special education should be incremental and return to the reality that the schools must provide a safe and learning environment where most of the students can flourish. How many students in special education programs are mainstreamed full-time in regular classrooms? An alternative to providing an environment for special education students that cannot matriculate in the school is homeschooling. The state offers all the tools needed for homeschooling. Another option is eliminating all programs that are unfunded. If the state does not provide funding for unfunded mandates, they do not consider it a priority. Therefore, all programs associated with unfunded mandates should be eliminated. It's time to defund many programs that have developed over the years. Another example of budget creep is the purchase of 2 Farms Village roads for special education. This project should be eliminated before it develops into another increase in expenditures year after year. The taxpayers can no longer continue to fund projects that are not core programs. It is time to demand that our elected officials take a leadership role in reducing programs and employees associated with the programs that are not cost effective. If the elected officials are not willing to reduce expenditures, then the taxpayers should vote no on all budgets to force reductions. The Board of Finance should demand that all budget associated with special education be greatly reduced. Special education programs appear to enrich the providers of the services without any responsibility to show positive results.
Joan, if you could wrap
As a
it up.
taxpayer in Simsbury, I cannot support these budgets, and I urge everyone to vote no on the proposed budgets. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury, Patch, and Twitter at Joan Co. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Joan.
I try to go fast.
I appreciate
I
that.
wanted you to listen very carefully.
Appreciate that.
Excellent color choice, by the way.
Oh, good.
Well
My
done.
team members.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone else Lori?
Low blood sugar though, so if I keel over, somebody pick me up.
Gems of wisdom.
All right, give me a signal of some
No,
sort.
I have some things. I don't know what candy. You'll know, I'll just go over. Lori Boyko from 15 Oakhurst Road. I wanna set the tone here. The Vice President of the United States makes $289,400. Members of Congress make $174,000. District judges, $247,000. The National Security Advisor for the President and the National Economic Advisor for the country are both capped at $185,000 White House salaries. We have a school system in which our superintendent makes over $250,000 a year. A high school principal makes $195,000. The middle school principal makes $190,000. An elementary principal makes $185,000. The director of equity makes $180,000, and the director of athletics makes $165,000. Something does not make sense, and I don't know who is negotiating these contracts, but it's outrageous. Our middle school and high schools combined have 6 security guards, 2 SRO police officers, and 1 retired police officer as director of security. Recently at the high school, I was going to pick something up and talk to the security guard who said, could I please ask them to get the Hartford Current delivered to the school library again, because it got canceled when the budget got cut last year, and he now no longer has a way to do the Hartford Current crossword puzzle while he's at work. From 2019 to the present, in the last 5 years, and this was an eye-opener for me as to why I was screaming about the taxes and I didn't understand why other people were not. The members of the board, and I'm not going to say who, you'll be able to figure it out for yourselves, had tax increases of the following: $179 over 5 years, 1.3%, $554, 4%, $1,920, 7.7%, $977, 9.7%, $981, 11.6%, and $6,151, 32%. My point is not that you're being treated differently. Some of you may have had work done on your homes or renovations, some of you haven't. However, the point is that not everyone over the last 5 years has seen the same tax increase as a result of the revaluation. That's really important to understand, because I looked up a whole lot of people on Ichabod and Fernwood, on Westwood and Westminster Cartaway, around Latimer Lane, and in Terriffill, in neighborhoods that are generally more modest in price. And by and large, the tax increases on those homes were 23%, 24%, 27%, 36%. And my taxes actually went up, with no work on my home, 42%. If this budget goes through, my taxes will go up a total over the last 5 years of 47%. That's in the thousands of dollars. I've been told by some people to move if my taxes have gone up too much, by the same crowd that's spouting about diversity, equity, inclusion, and affordable housing. What this reval did was shift the tax burden from businesses and homeowners most able to afford it to those often least able to afford the increases. And I'm asking this board to take that into consideration when they allow these budgets to go through, because not everyone is being impacted the same. I have more to say, but I know I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing none, I think we're ready to go on to Matt Curtis,
Okay.
who is Superintendent of Schools, presentation of the budget.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Appreciate a couple minutes to go through the presentation of our budget. I know that we've all put a lot of time and energy into it, so it's good to have an opportunity to kind of pull together here. Thanks. So, we practice what we call a continuous improvement model with the Board of Education. It's grounded in our strategic plan, which is a 5-year strategic plan. We make all our decisions kind of in a comparative way against our 4 Board of Education goals. So we have a goal around student growth and success, one around our school climate and culture, a capital goal around strategic investments, and then kind of our hiring practices around a premier workforce. So just want to put that up at the forefront. We've been engaged in a pretty significant process this year of creating the next iteration of our 5-year goals. So we'll be looking forward to sharing that with you at the end of the year when the Board of Ed approves that. So in terms of process, it is a process, as you know, that goes on for some time. We start in November at our level with our program directors and our principals who have an opportunity to kind of roll forward their vision and their mission and where they want to see things go. We do some formal presentations from our principals and program directors at central office. We pulled together at that tri-board meeting. I thought it was a great conversation this year, very collaborative in terms of boards really trying to get on board with the challenges that we were presented with in terms of tax burden and things you talked about, and mill rate increases over the past several years. January, we have 2 reviews. We do a large special education review with Katie Krasula to the board, and then Neil runs us through a staffing and enrollment presentation and shares what those staffing kind of needs and wants are presented by our principals and program directors. And in February, we move forward with a presentation where I present to the board, and we have a workshop where we go over line items, grants, and so forth. A couple of you attended that on a Saturday. So the overall increase this year is a 3.91% increase over last year's operating costs, about $3.1 million, putting our total expenditures at $89,160,028. So for this evening's presentation, I have 3 buckets that I'm going to work through. One is really going through some of the contextual factors that we think about when we frame the budget. Condense this next version, but just some kind of return on investment talking points, and then we'll get to the overall budget driver numbers. All right, so what's interesting about this budget is so much information has changed over time, as even up to today where we've received some new news. But it really is a balancing act each and every year. We talked about the cost of living increase early on in the year at our tri-board, and the desire of your board to have a tax increase come in hopefully under that cost of living increase. Inflation continues to be a challenge. Negative projected grand list growth.
It's not going through on, it's not streaming presentation.
Okay, what does that mean?
Do you connect it to something?
I mean, it's connected to the wall like it normally is. Can you show the camera to the projector?
It doesn't show anything. Well, let me turn the lights off.
Ambiance.
Budget ambiance.
Budget ambiance.
Is that a thing?
No. Appreciate the course correction. Local mill rate, we discussed in comparative how high our mill rate was to comparative towns. We talked earlier, actually Joan mentioned it in her comments, several months ago. We recognized that we were going to receive 10% less of what we call our excess cost reimbursement. As state needs have gotten greater, they have not changed that pot of money to disperse to districts. In the current year, we were kind of hit with that reality. It's over $400,000. We have probably some new news to share on that later on, which I think is more positive, but that's certainly a challenge in our planning. The guidance you provided us of a 2.9% increase And then I put in there that we're fortunate to see a pretty substantial 11% increase in our educational cost share revenue, which historically goes to the town of $852,000. So a lot of moving parts there. Our budget themes really working through, really trying to think about a maintenance budget to the extent we could this year, increase our contractual obligations, market increases in special education. We'll spend some time talking about that. This budget does look to address some operational needs this year, some things we've ignored over time. We haven't cut into programs in this budget presentation to you, so we'll be able to roll forward the programs at Simsbury High School, the elective opportunities as we've been constituted. And I put in there as well, we've had a lot of public conversation over the past 5 or 6 months about the specialized programming and the purchase of the building next to Simsbury High School. So certainly a lot going on that weighs into the development of the cost. Some basic financial costs, some audited data. There's not too many points out there that are audited that we can compare to other districts on. Our per pupil expenditure is 1. So I share that with you this evening. You can see our per pupil expenditure a little bit over $20,000. State average is 22 rather. Our DERG average, which is the comparative district, we're compared to 20 like districts in the state, 21,000. Of the 27 towns in the area here, we're kind of in the middle. We're at about 15. Peer communities, I put the communities that we often talk about in comparison to expenditures, in comparison to performance. I share their per pupil expenditures, a couple a little bit less, a couple a little bit higher. We've kind of landed in the middle of the last several years on that. As we develop our budgets, superintendents do a lot of comparing, trying to get a local landscape on what's going on. These numbers certainly move over time, but at the time that the superintendents in these districts presented, those were their operating increases. You can see a high of 597 from South Windsor. And then Avon and thank you. Simsbury in the 4s when we presented, and the board reduced my budget a little bit. So the other comparative data point that we pulled, because we have had a lot of conversation around special education, particularly the last couple years, and making that information a little more public than we had in the past. The percentage of our operating dollars that go towards special education is about 24.5%. The DERG average is about the same. And when we line that up, Simsbury again is about in the middle of the DERG in terms of comparative. So yes, we have seen significant growth. We know that, we've been talking about that, but in terms of the lay of the land, a lot of other districts are seeing those same challenges. So just 2 quick slides on return on investment. I selected the kind of state measures and where we stand comparatively in our reference group. NGSS is the science standardized achievement test, where we were top in the DERG and I think second in the overalls in the state. SATs towards the top of the DERG, the top of the DERG in ELA and second in the DERG in math. Certainly some math performance improvements still to come statewide when you see the percentage of kids meeting the college readiness mark, but comparatively we've done very well. U.S. News and World Report ranked their 10 best high schools this past year, and Simsbury was ranked 7th. So a strong performance there as well on a couple indicators. Sustainable and strategic investments, certainly one of our Board of Education goals. Wanted to celebrate the renovation at Latimer. We had the open house at the beginning of the year. I know many of your board came to that. 600 community members actually came out to tour the school. The 6th graders put on the tour for them. It was really great. So a lot of interested people that had gone to Latimer in years past and couldn't believe what the new facility looked like. So really a beautiful job and a nice community resource as well, with the full-size gym that's utilized on a nightly basis now by the community, which is great. We had some smaller capital investments from CNR that your board helped us with last year out of reserves. Under the leadership of Kyle Loveland and Jason Casey, we were able to get a significant amount of what I'd say kind of cosmetic work done that does make a huge difference. I mean, new carpets at Squadron Line, walls painted. We were able to move through a lot of work with the ability to have those funds in one place available at one time. So I wanted to share that with you. And we opened a new location for Farmington Valley Transition Academy, similar kind of program model that we've talked about for the other school over in Riverdale Farms is up and running. So just wanted to share those points with you. All right, so moving on to the dollars in the framework. We kind of built a basic framework this year when we initiated our conversations with your board back in the December timeframe, where we shared a fixed cost number. I think at the time it was about a 3.6. We didn't have the utilities in there. So we kind of wanted to, in an effort to stay consistent off that number, built the framework that we'd work from that fixed cost number. We've identified 3 buckets that we develop proposals in throughout the budget. One is in the operations, staffing, and special education. So the rest of my presentation is just presenting those buckets to you, and then we can certainly open it up for any questions people have. So at the end of the day, with all the movement in fixed costs, we land at a 1.61% increase over last year's operating costs. The main areas certainly are salaries and benefits, which is really 80% of our overall operating costs. You can see that increase is a 1.73, reduced from where we started in our presentation to the Board of Finance, because we did reduce 4 full-time equivalent positions this year. We took a hard look at our retirements, took a hard look at class sizes, and reduced the full value of 4 positions, 2 at Simsbury High School, 2 at the elementary level, pushing class size up a little bit, but still within guidelines. But we were able to get a reduction of close to a little over $500,000 from those 4 positions. Contingency line item is basically our unaffiliated placeholder for salary increases. NAGE, which is a group that we're negotiating this year, good sized group of custodians. And then what we talk about is changes in like degrees and steps. If somebody gets a master's degree, we need to be able to react to what that contractual increase would be over time. So those 3 areas make up that $321,000 increase. Very favorable insurance this year. We've talked about that throughout the process. That gave us the benefit of not having a much higher budget number this year. And then utilities, mostly on the electricity side, $218,000 for an overall increase of 1.61%. Operations became, I don't want to call it a catch-all, but as in order for us to stay true to that fixed kind of cost number that we presented in the middle, we do have some other insurance drivers that come to fruition later on in the budget process. So I won't share each one of these data points with you, but the 2 largest drivers there are defined contribution pension contribution and our retiree health insurance. Together, about $250,000 or a 0.3% increase. Other numbers certainly smaller, but a little bit of drivers there as well. Transportation, that represents our kind of base transportation contract with Salters. It's a 6% increase over last year's cost, or $91,000. I'll talk about the special education transportation in a later slide. Student activities, it's almost like coaching stipends, club stipends for our staff, a subsidy for our athletic trainer in terms of kind of right sizing availability there. It's important for us to have access to 2 trainers on certain nights, so we had to expand our contract to include hourly dollars and pull that into operating and away from pay for play. And equipment replacement, so that represents both some of the tech increases as well as some of the equipment maintenance increases, scrubbers, lawnmowers, things of that nature. We've really, in essence, in trying to tighten the belt over time, have ignored some of those needs and they need to be addressed. Library books and databases, we cut that line item last year, $53,000. This is to put those dollars back in the budget. It's to kind of make up for the cliff we created in trying to lower the budget last year. It goes across all 7 of our buildings. Special ed supplies, copier increase. We've gotten away from toner, which provides us some pretty significant savings, but we've added in the number of copiers around the building to meet the needs of people. So it kind of washes out there. Maintenance to plant is a pretty significant increase. The majority of that is in the HVAC line item. Significant new state mandate in how we test, monitor our systems. We have to bring in outside consultants to do that. We have a 3 to 5 year plan, Jason? I know we presented that to the Board of Ed, to bring in consultants to do that, and also additional dollars really for the fixes. I mean, it was an under budgeted line item for many years. This is kind of right sizing it and aligning it with the new demand in air quality. Fuel increases, custodial supplies, snow contract increase. We had a one-time vendor for many, many years. They no longer provide the service, so we renegotiated the contract and have seen, pretty significant increase there. We have had some early conversations with Tom Roy and the town about maybe there's a way we can collaborate on this in the future and do, kind of a joint shared service in this area. A lot of communities do, but we probably have to add or share some level of service on the personnel front, but it's an ongoing conversation there. Just some small nominal things to balance the numbers, and then adjustments in our overall grants and use of non-lapsing. This is the last year where we did present for some of that staffing with ARPA, how we would phase that back into the operating cost. We had been utilizing non-lapsing and each year kind of paying down the cliff. This is the last payment until that's absorbed into the operating costs. So all in all, the operations increase is a 1.26% increase. And then the last bucket is special education, a little bit over 1%, 890,000. The most significant driver there we've talked significantly about is our out-of-district tuition cost. So that 650,000 represents a 10% increase over the gross amount of our tuitions that are in the budget now, with a flexibility for a 1 or 2 student sway in that number. So significant dollars there. As you know, we're working towards different programming options to try to offset that. But that's a major driver in our budget and many surrounding towns' budget. The excess cost reimbursement, that's what I talked about before. We saw a decrease in the reimbursement amount to a total of a little over 400,000 that we need to adjust for. Transportation, we've made an adjustments with third-party vendor. Last year, that increase was really significant. I feel like with one vendor, we're getting those dollars a little bit under control. We're able to get some cost containment, able to negotiate a little more effectively without on the fly having to contact 5 vendors and see what we can do there. So Amy's done some really great work with Neil on that. So total special ed increase of 1.52. We've had conversations about being held harmless by your board if people are in agreement as we go through this process on the 411. There's new information out now that it does look like the $400,000 in the current year will be approved by Lamont. So that's a positive in our current year, and we can talk about, those are your lanes, I'm not gonna get in your lanes, how you wanna move those numbers moving forward. But we got some, late news that it looks like that will be announced tomorrow. So that will be very, very helpful. And then the staffing, we had a lot of conversation about staffing this year. There were certainly needs identified by our program directors and by special education as well. We thought it was important in lieu of the conversation that we had at the tri-board, without an overall increase in our enrollment that we're responding to, that we try to really not come forward with increased staffing needs. We're actually coming forward with $500,000 less in staffing in working through that process. So my leadership team has been very supportive of that. It's not the perfect scenario, it's kind of a status quo scenario, but that's what we proposed in this budget, and my Board of Ed supported it when they moved forward as well. So then you take the 3 buckets, the fixed cost, the operations, and the special education, and you roll them forward, and that is the 3.91% budget increase. I'm gonna hold it there. I have a couple other slides that we could pull up based on where the conversation goes, but that in a nutshell is what our Board of Education approved. I presented a budget a little bit over 3, and they had some requested reductions that we came back with. So 4-3. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for that, and thank you to your board members for the work. Navy and all staff who worked on this. We appreciate everything you guys have done. Bert and I had an opportunity to attend the workshop and found that very informative, and the budget books were very good. Hopefully people on our board got a chance to look at some questions that were submitted to Matt, and we got pretty thorough responses on that, so a lot of our questions have been asked and answered. But want to open it up to board members for specific questions. Matt mentioned we did get some late breaking news. We are optimistic that will come true, but it's still in negotiations, but we're hopeful. So I'll start. Is there anyone who'd like to start? Question.
Can you just say, is that the budget override? Is that what you're referring to
Yeah.
obliquely or?
No, so I got a call from the lieutenant governor today on something else, and I asked her what's going on with special ed, and she said the governor's in negotiations with the legislature, and they are optimistic that they're gonna come to an accommodation.
Oh.
And they will find other funds with which to fund special education this year because the uproar was so high, because the need was so high. So she was optimistic that this was gonna come to fruition and would likely happen tomorrow, and Matt and I have her permission to share that publicly.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
No.
One thing that Matt, that has been on the public's mind is we do get some federal dollars.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the federal dollars we receive and whether you have any information about if any of that is at risk?
Yeah. So we receive about 1.5 million in federal dollars, which is largely the IDEA grant, which is about 1.3, and then we receive some Title I allotments, Title II, and some other smaller allotments from the feds. I don't have direct insight or contact into the what could happen. We've seen the notifications that are out there. We've received some legal guidance from the State Department of Education that makes it seem highly unlikely that the IDEA grant would get touched in terms of from a legal standpoint. What was summarized to us was that you can't hold a grant, you can't be held hostage to a grant in lieu of a curricular change. And if there was a mandate or a shift in the law, because the laws have not changed, so if there was a shift in the law, there'd have to be a very lengthy process where you'd have an opportunity to appeal over a long duration of time. So in terms of, kind of short-term planning and what would come out of this, it does not seem like that grant would be touched, but I don't have a clear window into that world.
At least we have no information that it will be touched at this point. Okay.
Correct.
We're also seeing increased paid family leave. Is that impacting your budget or at this point?
So that's interesting, and that's gotten a lot of conversation amongst districts and amongst superintendents because we provide really strong sick leave benefits to the majority of our employees. So it impacts us on a small scale and adds to a benefit that is already there for other people. It's not a significant cost driver. It's much more of I'll just say it, a major nuisance from a management standpoint because they can take hourly leaves and do things that don't really fit classroom experience, I guess I would say. So we're managing that, but it's about a $36,000 impact when we analyzed it from a human resource standpoint. We would cover that through salary accounts or through our substitute account. So not a major impact, more of a logistics issue for us.
And Matt, can you talk about the non-lapsing fund and how much we have in there? And we saw that you're using some of it for the ARPA cliff smoothing in. When we passed the ARPA, this was raised to public audience. We were all aware that this would need to be feathered into the operating budget, and credit to you and your staff who came up with a plan. Our board does not support cliffs unless there's a plan to smooth it in.
Right.
At the time it was approved, you delivered the plan and you've been implementing, and this is the final year of the implementation. So it was done with intention. But can you talk about how much is in there and what you're using it for this year?
So about 588,000. Our initial plan was to hold and use that for the deficit that was created by the excess cost. We felt that would have been an appropriate rationale for use. So that was the plan.
Might still need it for that, but.
Yeah, you don't know, so.
So we have coming up, do we have any expectations that I mean, the state has said they're gonna do better, but there is a high likelihood that we're gonna be in the same position, in which case that not
Yeah, I
exactly
mean,
what it is in
they-
2026.
Even if they fill that void right now, his current budget isn't putting those dollars back in until year 2, so then you create a hole in year 1 of his biannual, so I think we still have some challenges there that we need to sort through. And one of the primary reasons when we go back years and years when we talked about that fund was if we don't budget contingency, how do we respond to some of the volatility in special education, and that fund has helped in the past, so.
And that would be the intention again if we find a
Absolutely.
shortfall.
Yep.
Okay. Down the line, Mike, do you have anything?
No, the Excel spreadsheet covered a lot of my questions. That was helpful, thank you.
Art?
I had two thoughts. One is, we gave you some guidelines to cut, and it's clear you did, and I just want to note that. We could always use a little more, but you did, and thank you. I can tell you got your knife out, and there might be some pain there that you're not talking about. But and the other, it's perhaps gratuitous, but the numbers you cited about the performance of the school system, I had noted those, that had they been the opposite, you would be taking heed. What's the matter? You're the superintendent, how come we're slipping? And we didn't. So I just think that it's not just money. It's not just money that produces educational excellence. There's also management, direction, and leadership on that. And so I think we need to recognize that while we're looking at the budget right now, you did deliver the results. And so I think for the record, we should know that you did that. It's one of the reasons people move to Simsbury is a good education system, and you produce results.
Thank you.
Okay. Nothing else?
The only thing I'll add to that is we did get an unexpected increase on our education cost sharing, $850, and the intention of those dollars was it to be used for special education. You saw the special education increase is $850, we got $850.
Yeah.
So although that's a revenue for the town, if you net it out for this,
About
we
1%,
actually, you
yeah.
did come in about
And
200.
it's interesting, and we'll have to keep an eye on it. In his budget, there were actually stipulations on that grant that have never existed before in terms of clear language that it has to be used for specific reasons, which would almost indicate a wash back to the Board of Ed as a grant and an offset, like you said. I mean, either way, it's a benefit and a pretty substantial increase. We had definitely been underfunded in that area over time. We've seen some small increases, but I can't remember an increase that large in the last 15, 20 years. I know Farmington got a major adjustment as well, so.
Yeah, some of the schools across the state got adjustments downward because they were correcting. We've been underfunded for a number of years, so we were fortunate that we were not one of those.
And this money is secure?
This money is secure, it's in hand, yes.
Amy's got it?
Well,
Not yet.
but it
It's
is written,
passed.
it's written,
Yes.
as it is written, so it is. Are there any other questions? Okay, Amy, can you pull up my rainbow and storm cloud slides? What we wanted to do is sort of level set where we are. We started out, this board saying we wanted to come in with a tax increase below 2.5%. And the reason why we did that is the Social Security cost of living adjustment was 2.5%. To Ms. Boyko's comments, we were trying to make sure that we keep a budget that's affordable. We do appreciate that there have been large increases over the last few years. It was very different, as Ms. Boyko pointed out. About 10% of our residents actually saw a tax decrease with the revaluation. About 12% of our, or 20% saw very large increases in their taxes, and the median increase was 518. So it was all over the board. So our guidance was 2.5. We also look at the consumer price index as of January. That's typically our number for the Board of Finance, and that was a 3. The state is using a 3.2 CPI for their municipal cap calculation. So that's within the context that we looked at. So if we go to the next slide. You'll see when we started with the tri-board, we began with a 694, management just fixed costs. That's where we started. And we said at that point, we need to find $3 million to get to our goal. Those $3 million can come from the use of reserves, if we find revenues or reductions. And so this is the story of what happened. The first thing the Board of Finance did is we implemented the debt service smoothing plan, which has us using 1.3 million of reserves for this fiscal year, then 700 the next year, and then a different amount in the following year, because we have a bump in debt service, then that goes away after 3 years. So there's a cliff that's paid for, those dollars have been put aside. It is not a cliff because we have put those dollars aside, they are unassigned. After that, we were very fortunate to receive increased revenues from the state. We got an additional $850,000 in educational cost sharing. We had some assessor adjustments of $771 dollars from the motor vehicle assessment that we think the Board of Selectmen is going to adopt, and we'll talk about that in a second. We also had an adjustment of $400,000 of new revenues on fines, so that was a new revenue that was different than what was presented during the tri-board. And then finally, there were some cuts made. The Board of Selectmen made about $160,000 in cuts, and the Board of Ed made about $400,000. The net result as of right now, and again, we're not done because there are some unknowns, is a 232 tax increase. So we set out to find 3 million, we found 3 million and were able to get it down, some with help from the state, a lot of it from help with the state. So if you go to the next slide, we're not done yet because there are some risks and unknowns. The budget uses about $450,000 of general fund reserves, which is dependent on increased grand list growth in 2027. One of the things our board will be discussing is instead of using that, using health reserves. The second risk is the budget incorporates about $100,000 in new building fee revenue, but that is dependent on the Board of Selectmen passing a new fee schedule, so we'll have to make sure that happens before we pass our budget. The budget incorporates a new depreciation option offered by the state that I mentioned in the previous slide, but again, that's dependent on a Board of Selectmen vote to opt in. It requires an opt-in. So they will be approving a date for a hearing for that, and we expect that to be complete before the budget process so that we can incorporate it into the budget. One of the risks that we have is that the state will revert back to the previous state depreciation rate schedule. If that happens, that will be an impact again, loss of revenue to the town for next year. So that is a potential cliff that we're monitoring. And then finally, there was a strange occurrence that happened. We were expecting to get $230,000 motor vehicle reimbursement from the state, but instead of it coming to the town, it went to the fire district. The town manager has been in, and the finance director has been in consultation with the fire district, and we are hoping that those dollars will be returned to the town since they are owed to us. We fully expect that to happen, but it's going to their board on March 10th. So those are just some of the unknowns that we're going with. So I would say overall, it's more sunshine than storm clouds, but there are some issues, so I can't say we're done, but a few things we're gonna be looking at. Anyone have any questions on these slides?
Helpful.
The 2.3% increase, that incorporates, I think you're gonna be discussing it soon, the effect of the new depreciation schedules on the automotive tax.
It does not though include what we do not yet have the analysis is what that does to the car tax.
Right, but those numbers, the 2.32 includes the increased projections for the change in the depreciation schedule, yes.
So that's on the residential. The residential property tax is a 2.3. We don't know. The car tax, we were looking at an average savings of about $62 on car taxes. That will probably be adjusted to maybe 40, 30. I don't know what the savings are gonna be.
We're working on it with the assessor's office. They sent back some data, but I had questions on it, so we're going back and forth right now.
So I'm sorry, but when we usually do the budget, well, for example, last year when we did the budget analysis, we didn't break out a separate line item for the automobile tax. If we did it the way we did it last year, we'd still come out with that 2.3?
It was.
Bravo.
No, I mean, really congratulates to everyone. It was a team effort. It required all three boards digging deep, finding resources, pulling their part, and the state, credit to the state who did come through for the town of Simsbury in a big way, and to our assessor who found some revenue as well. So that's where we are with that. We're gonna go into some budget discussion next, unless there are more questions for Matt.
You're looking at gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah, Wendy's
He's ready to run away. He's
Yeah.
like, I'll take my good news and go.
That's the kind of thing when you've got you've got this reaction, stop talking. Alright, so Amy, if you could pull up our budget modeling and we'll sort of walk through the changes and what happened. Just to remind folks what our goals were for the public. We said, look, debt service not above 8%, but targeted at 7% of the operating budget. We wanted general reserves to be about 16%, pension investment assumption 6.5, health reserves at 20 to 25%, and staying below the municipal cap. So we'll walk through the numbers. Amy, if you can just walk through each line item.
Sure.
I think there were some changes made. We may have the wrong thing up there.
So this is what the Board of Selectmen approved last night. Everything is in the line items. You wanted me to go through the Board of Selectmen changes?
Yes, Board of Selectmen. Let's start there and just show, no, just on the slide there, you've got
This one, yeah.
town operating at 325, but that's incorrect, right?
It's not. The town budget is this line, it's the 295.
Ah, okay.
So last night, the Board of Selectmen approved their budget. They're coming in at an increase of 2.95 or $852,000 increase. The Board of Education budget, Matthew just took you through. The debt service is an 18% increase, and then in our revenues, we have a 17% increase, which is that transfer that Lisa had mentioned to offset our debt service by 1.3 million. So overall, our net expenditures are 2.83%. And if we translate that down to our mill rate, this gives us a tax increase on the town side of 2.32%. And then the median home impact is about a $205 increase. We don't know what the fire district is gonna do yet, but if they had stayed flat, it would be a 2.25% increase.
Amy, can you go back to the revenue?
Mhm.
And can you break out the anticipated revenue and do the 1.3, just show that as a new line item of capital reserves so the public knows we're using the reserves there? And there you can see the anticipated revenue without reserves is about 824. One of the things we discussed as this board was concerned about using general fund balance because that then creates a cliff. Mark, one of the things when you present to us on the 11th, if you could just show us through what makes up the 1.6 million anticipated grant list and how much of that is already booked and what is dependent. And to the extent it's dependent, if you could give us the risk percentages there.
Sure. Could you scroll down a little again? So. Oh, I see. How is it that we get from a mill rate, a town mill rate of an increase of 2.32%, we keep the fire mill rate flat and the total mill rate is small?
If you could show us the grand list, I think that's where the story happens.
What do you mean?
Why is the total mill rate only 2.25 and not 2.32?
Because when you do the calculation for, it's a higher number, so then the percentage changes.
You're averaging 232 with zero basically.
Right, exactly, so it goes down a little bit because you have this zero in here. That's a better way to explain it, thanks Art.
Can you talk about what happened with the motor vehicle revenue? We got about 550 back, 600 back.
So we were gonna lose revenue of about $800,000 under the new law that passed, changing from an NADA fair market value of a vehicle to a MSRP with a depreciation schedule. There were several letters written to the state requesting this change because it hit the municipality so hard. So they had decided that instead of starting with an 85% reduction in depreciation schedule, they were gonna start at 90%. So with that change, if it is adopted by the Board of Selectmen, that will take our $800,000 loss in motor vehicle revenue down to a loss of $45,000. So that was a huge help.
One of the things, Amy, our board had discussed, and I know you're preparing information on, is using health reserves instead of that. Can you show us what that would look like? Have you reached out to our consultant on that?
So the health reserves, I just have that offhand calculation that I did with you. It's about $495,000 that we can do. Our reserve levels should be 20 to 25%. Anything over that, if we use a third of that, it was the $495,000 that can be used between the town and the Board of Education. Board of Education has already committed to $100,000, so then the town has $395,000 available.
So that gets us pretty close.
So maybe we should make it clear that our consultants recommend that we maintain health reserves of 25%. And if we get high, we're currently at 35%. And if we get over 25%, the recommendation is not that we spend all of it, but that we may use up to a third. And that's where those numbers come from.
Right.
Okay, and I think there was consensus on our board that we preferred that.
Makes sense.
Okay, and Amy, we still have in assignments in the general fund about $850 that we have not yet unassigned, and that was in anticipation of a healthcare cliff this year. If we could get an analysis from you whether it makes sense to unassign that or to keep partially assigned or to reassign it partially for health and partially for special education.
Okay.
For our next meeting and see where we wanna go with that. Oh, Matt left, I had one question for him, but I'll give it to you. We had asked for a list of CNR from the Board of Ed. Make sure that
Looks like
that,
Jason left too, but we'll have it for you.
okay, if you could get that before the Board of Selectmen meeting.
He has it.
Okay, that would be great. The earlier you can get it to us, the better, and just prioritize what, obviously try to fund as much as we can on that.
See, I was a little late arriving, that's why they made me stay.
Yeah. And Amy, for
That's my
capital
punch
reserves,
list.
if you could go to the capital reserves tab and show us what we have there. Go all the way towards the bottom.
This is just running totals, but as of 6/30/25, our anticipated balance unassigned is 4.6. The town manager proposed uses close to 900,000 in those reserves to get us to 3.7, and then we had approved $1 billion for the purchase of 2 Farms Village. That may or may not come out of that depending on if the board wants to take a look at what bonding looks like versus utilizing our cash. So we would have about 2.7 available.
Then Amy, at our last quarter, you were projecting year-end surplus revenue of about 2 million. Is that still on track for that? So upon that 2.7, we would then replenish it with another 2.547. So that does give us some possibility to do some Board of Ed capital non-recurring. One of the things that we had talked about with Amy and that she had mentioned that I think is accurate is that we have been fortunate to have year-end surplus for a number of reasons. One, if you'll recall, the interest investment income came in skyrocketed higher than any municipality had budgeted. So that has now been adjusted and we will not see that again. We also got some state grants that we were told do not budget for, you will not get, and then we got an almost $700,000 grant. So we do not anticipate those major drivers to be there. So that leaves the only other driver that we do plan for, but that is a ballast if we run over somewhere else, is the tax collection assumption rate, and that has been a range anywhere from 100,000 to 1.3 at the highest. So it's very variable, and on average, because that's not just the tax collection assumption rate, it's all the tax department in there, and some of those numbers fluctuate. But generally, it's between 6 and $1 million.
And this is
so-
where we assume the 98.5 or
Yes.
something?
But you know, sometimes it's 100,000.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
so if you sort of think about, we're entering into a little bit of a tough surplus, year-end surplus time, we're not gonna see those flush accounts, like, and the state is seeing that too, you're seeing that. Lamont's like, guys, those days are done, they're done. So what does that mean going forward? Do you use all of the reserves knowing that you're getting 2 million, or do you start to plan for these reduced revenues? And I think it's probably prudent to start to plan for that. And if we
Yeah.
do assume it's only gonna be 1 million, then we can probably use over the next 5 years, 1.5 million a year in reserves. But we'll sort of go through that analysis. But so when we think, oh, there's a lot there, if we know it has to last for 5 years, we probably wanna slow down. Somewhere between 1 million to 1.5 million a year planning on reserves, unless the grand list grows. In which case, obviously, we can have a different conversation. We will say we are in the hole with the grand list, even with grand list growth, we're probably gonna get back to the baseline next year because we have too close there. But using health reserves will actually eliminate one of those cliffs. And I know I was talking with Mark, he was disappointed they didn't get lower than 2.9 by using health reserves, we're gonna get you lower than 2.9.
We appreciate that, Chair. Thank
I do wanna we were able to congratulate Matt, but I also wanna congratulate you, great job, you and your board and your
Email.
staff, so thank you.
Appreciate your guidance. Thank you.
Alright, so we have those two things we're thinking about.
And just so I'm clear, by using the overage and the health reserves, and by doing the third, that sort of protects us from having risk of a cliff.
Well, yes, because we're not using all of the reserves,
You
there will
still have
still be
two-thirds.
reserves, and don't forget, we have the assignment for health in the general fund,
Right.
which we can keep assigned if this board is feeling cautious, and it's not a bad year to be cautious. So that will, it doesn't, I guess, eliminate the cliff, but there are funds available to
Manage it.
manage the cliff.
Sure. Got it.
So that's one way to think about it, without relying on grand list growth. If we have the grand list growth, that will be another bucket for some other things. One of the things we hear about all the time is, oh my gosh, you don't have enough capital in the operating budget. And I thought it was a good time to sort of review what we have. We have a bunch of stuff that we put into the operating budget. Those are generally called general fund operating transfers. Those are things like the radio, police vehicles, the library computer replacement, materials recycling, the plow truck, and a little bit of sidewalks. We also have things in capital that aren't transfers, but that are capital projects within the operating budget. And that's roads and drainage, roads improvements, building improvements, and computer software, which is now almost $200,000. So we've added a lot into the operating budget that's sort of consistent revenue, so not variable, stuff you can count on. We also have consistent revenue that we can use for capital every year. That's TAR, Town Aid Road, 370, LoSiP, 245, we get that every year, and 77. Reliable revenue you can use for capital. We have the general fund traditional payback, which is for the town and the Board of Education, 416 and 530. And the total of that is sort of pay as you go, so cash that we tax for, or recurring state grants. And that total is almost 3 million, $2.8 million. So we've done a good job moving that in. We're spending at least $850 on capital reserves. That's also taxes, it's prior year taxes, but used this year. We're probably going to spend a similar, somewhere between $500 and $700 for the Board of Ed on capital there, so that's about 1.5 million. So making great progress there. That 1.5 million is less reliable recurrent because it's capital reserves, it's dependent on us replenishing it. But it's money that we put aside for the taxpayer to reduce taxes going forward. Same thing, it's taxes, tax me now or tax me later. Doesn't help to get rid of the reserves because you just have to tax for it the next year. The reason why we do it that way is if there is a problem with the budget, a deficit, that money can be used to make up for the deficit. Anything that's not needed for a deficit gets credited to the taxpayer in capital. So we're actually making great progress there, and I do wanna acknowledge that and thank everyone for that. But there is always gonna be a level of uncertainty with capital. One, there are more needs than we have revenues to fund, and some of the revenue that we use to fund capital is variable from year to year, and that's just never gonna change. So we're always gonna have that problem a little bit. Alright, so main things from Amy that we need is the analysis on the impact to the motor vehicle, how we would do the numbers to change it to the health reserves. Is there anything else we need from Amy for the next meeting? And from Mark, we're gonna get an update on the grant list. Okay. Amy, when can we expect hard copies? A few of us have asked for hard copies of the Board of Ed budget.
Melissa?
I mean, the town budget, we have the Board of Ed.
I'm working on it now, hopefully. I was aiming for Friday, is that gonna be too late? So it's the digital budget book this year, so we are gonna convert it to a PDF. It won't be perfect visually, but we will run off 3 copies as requested. So I'm aiming for having everything wrapped up by the end of the day, Thursday, so, but the printing will be kind of
Okay.
chore.
Going forward, to the extent we can, if we can get the board's information earlier so they don't have to work on the weekends. I know staff doesn't like to work on the weekends. Nobody likes to work on the weekends, but we'll certainly understand that.
As soon as the digital version's ready, I'll send the link.
Okay, great, thank
That's-
you.
That's very close, so.
Okay, excellent. Update on, a couple of updates. I did speak with Franklin, the annual report is underway and I expect that to be done at the end of March. Requests have gone out to the chairs to get their letters in.
Busy and said they would be delayed.
Yes, and next year we anticipate that this will get done on time. We'll be working towards getting that on time, but there is a draft letter in your packets. Since it's from all of us, make sure you read it. If for some reason you don't like any of it, let's make the changes next meeting and Amy will just confirm the numbers and make sure there's no errors in it. But if folks are okay with that, we'll go ahead and use that. Mark, one of the things that's gonna happen is a flyer is gonna go out in advance of our hearing. And we'd obviously like to see a draft of that, so when you have that, if you could share that, that would be great. I think those are. And the timeline for the building fees is going, what is the timeline for the building fees and for the adoption of the resolution for the motor vehicle?
So we're scheduling the hearing on Monday night. And I believe, when will the hearing end up being? Will it be on the 24th?
So the public hearing would be set for your meeting on the 24th, and you'd have to vote coming directly out of the public hearing.
Yeah, or if worst case would be a special meeting before it goes to you guys. The resolution does not need a public hearing, it's just a Board of Selectmen legislative body resolution, which we plan to do on Monday night also.
And this board, we can go ahead and hold the public hearing. Obviously, if there's a problem with approving the fees, it's about $100,000, that would then need to come out and pass the budget. But there's time to accommodate that. Okay. Are we done with public budget discussions? Is there anything else, any other information that the public needs?
I would just return to a point we were making before. I mean, the last 2 years, we had very difficult budget years. And we worked right up until the wire to get to numbers that we were all unhappy with. And this year, we started at the tri-board and heard commitments from the other boards that we hadn't heard in past years. And you guys really, I'm sorry the Board of Ed isn't here, but you guys really delivered on your promises and everybody took it seriously. And this suddenly I feel like my job's much easier than it was the last 2 years. So nice work. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And we do have someone from the Board of Ed.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Neil, so thank you.
Well, I mean, from the board itself, I forgot.
I'm good.
Yeah, and thank you to
I
everyone
just
who's
assumed you
worked
would
on it.
sneak out when you had the chance.
No, but please extend our thanks to all your staff who also worked on it, because we know how many hours went into that. And I hope you're proud of what you've done, because that was a hard thing to get to, and this is something I think the public, I hope, can be proud of. It delivers the services that we enjoy at a cost within keeping of the inflation rates and the cost of living. Although, to Ms. Boyko's point, we do understand that this is on top of prior year's tax increases. So we are cognizant, we do remain cognizant. Okay, going on to the minutes then.
I move that we approve the minutes of the meeting of what's the date?
January 18th,
January 18th.
is there a
I'll
second?
second.
I think, Amy, there was just one change in the minutes. I think it said, Ms. Hefner said there will be more public hearings, just say more opportunities to be heard, because I don't know if there will be public hearings per se.
Subject to that change, I move that we approve the minutes.
Accepted.
I'll abstain.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We have, as I mentioned, the annual report letter from the Board of Finance for 2024. If we could just, this is your first look, come back to it on the 10th. We'll put that on the agenda for the 10th to approve it, and then we'll meet at the 11th, right? Okay. May I have a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 1-206C and 100-206E, cybersecurity update. Present in an executive session will be this board, Amy Merriweather. Is that we were expecting,
Rick is here, I'll just text him, and then the risk management insurance piece.
So here, do you need me? I don't need to stay, but if you'd like me to, I will. Thank you, Chief.
So I move that we go into executive session and invite the people whom you identified.
Mike already.
I second Mike's motion.
okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education, and live broadcasts.
SCM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings, and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SCM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions, and it's no secret people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth, and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.